across Texas. The issue is.
I'm Stephen Dial in Dallas.
I'm Rudy Koski in Austin.
And I'm Greg Krugen in Houston, and this is Texas, the issue is.
A Senate bill would ban all forms of non-medical THC and just leave CBD, which is the original intent of a bill passed several years ago, according to some Republicans. I talked to Texas Ag Commissioner Sid Miller about the possibility of an all-out ban.
The circumvention of Texas law has led to the outright sale of these illegal products.
For hours, a Senate committee heard testimony from law enforcement, doctors, and the public about Senate Bill 3.
When it comes to SB 3, it would basically create an outright ban on things that aren't CBD. Do you agree with that?
Basically, it's just putting it back the way we intended to begin with. We didn't intend to have recreational marijuana. When we passed the hemp laws, I wrote the hemp rules for my agency. The Delta 8, Delta 9 didn't exist, so those have come along afterwards. So now we have junior high student can go in a gas station, buy a Delta 9, take it back to junior high and pass it out. That's unacceptable.
Lubbock State Senator Charles Perry wrote the bill, saying thousands of businesses are selling illegal products.
What happened is they took that and synthetically altered the deltas underneath. There's multiple delta components, and exploited that to where you've got extremely high THC content. So it will put them back to the original intent of CBD.
Law enforcement testified that some stores are selling Delta products with high levels of THC. We spoke to Texas Ag Commissioner Sid Miller about the bill and the impact it would have if passed.
Do you think it will conflict with federal law?
We're not going to conflict with federal law. What we're trying to do is parallel and mirror federal law. Everything in the legislation currently follows federal law. What's outside the law is possibly the Delta 8, Delta 9 loophole.
What makes you have pause to say that this is vital legislation that needs to happen?
Well, I'm kind of torn between, because we never wanted recreational marijuana, and that's basically what this is. But now you've got 8,000 businesses, mostly mom and pops, that have put their life savings into opening these new businesses, and we may put them out of business. That tugs at my heart a little bit. I hate to see anybody lose their life savings.
Jake Gary is the CEO of Fresh Grown Texas, the largest hemp grower in the state.
The people inside of Texas that grow, manufacture, and produce aren't making the products that you're trying to ban. If you really wanted to win on both sides, then all you'd have to do is create a market that states that only Texas-made products could sell in this state. I speak on behalf of the growers in this state, the manufacturers, and the consumers. All SP3 will do is kill an industry that is thriving and take away jobs.
I believe if this becomes law, it's really going to close the door on any type of discussion about recreational marijuana in Texas. Is that your hope as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're exactly right. Legislature never intended, to have recreational marijuana. So they're just kind of reeling it back in, putting it back to status quo. I just hope they don't cross over and go too far and limit the real medical marijuana that's helping a lot of people. Matter of fact, they could loosen the strings on that one a little bit, and I'd be much happier. I'd rather get bureaucrats and politicians out of people's medication and let the doctors and patients prescribe that to the patients as they see fit. That would be the ultimate freedom right there.
So my one word to describe that is precursor. Rudy, what's your one word?
Stephen, I think we all can agree the original law certainly got gummed up. So I'll go with gumbo.
Not gummy. Greg Krugen, what's yours?
Stephen, a tough one. I'll go with stoned, and in more ways than one.
The Fox Texas Trio will be right back after this break. And we are back. Now, you've seen them probably on nutrition shop stores in your neighborhood or at a gas station like Sid Miller, the Texas Ag Commissioner, mentioned, or just different places. You've seen Delta 8 signs, Delta 9 signs, and the legality has been political football. Greg, a lot of businesses, I've talked to some of these businesses here in North Texas, that's now a majority of their sales. Now, that wasn't the intent of the law, but we're where we are now, and there's 8,000 stores statewide. Do you think we're going to see a lot of doors closed if this passes?
Stephen, Governor Greg Abbott likes to promote our state's capitalism-friendly environment by declaring Texas is open for business. But with SB 3, that open door to profitable commerce will close almost as quickly as it opened for the purveyors of synthetic weed, because that's what it is. And those who partake do so for its intoxicating effect. Is anybody surprised that slinging Delta 8 and the like has become an $8 billion a year industry with 8,000 plus retailers in a state where more than 6 out of 10 Texans believe recreational marijuana should be completely legal for adults to consume anyway? To your question, of course the mom and pop shops would shutter en masse when they can no longer offer the intoxicants customers have come to expect. My guess is they knew the risk. Whether it comes to that pretty much depends on the House and the prospect of finding a handful of libertarian-minded Republicans willing to buck the lieutenant governor and join with Democrats to keep the buzz business legal.
The House definitely does have a shot at basically sinking this and leaving things in the air, so to speak. Rudy Koski, what are you hearing in Austin?
Yeah, I like what Greg just said, buzz. That should have been my word. I didn't think about that, but I'll stick with gumbo. The big argument I'm hearing here in the Austin area, it's coming, mostly from the businesses that offer these hemp products. According to the budget analysis, if this shutdown does happen, the state would lose about $20 million in tax money between 25 and 27. Some lobbyists who I've spoken to, admit, the businesses just went too far, saw a crack in the door, and busted that legal door open. Now they're having to do some damage control, pleading with state lawmakers just to scale back this crackdown, not a full and total crackdown. They know that's going to be really tough and a very hard sell. You got to remember, as Greg mentioned, the original bill was to help local farmers to develop a new fiber production industry, not a gummy bear industry, and not where coffee shops are pumping hemp derivatives into their drinks, as well as products to smoke. Did I mention gummies? Yeah, gummies to eat, which is why my word was gumbo. Now, it's a big unregulated mess, like a big pot of gumbo.
Yeah, I mean, Sid Miller talked about the intent was to just create another retail source for farmers, for growers, and this has kind of become the Wild West. Now, there's a separate bill to basically protect and kind of clarify some of the language when it comes to medical marijuana. But Greg, this definitely closes the door on recreational marijuana, the push in Texas, if it passes, right?
Senator Perry clearly feels betrayed by the industry and its pretty apparent unwillingness to police itself. And the lieutenant governor feels pretty much the same way by making this crackdown priority legislation. And then there's those poll numbers I mentioned earlier. Simply have it translated into an election issue which poses a threat to Republican dominance of the Lone Star State. Votes move policy, and the pro-smoke crowd isn't imposing anything near its potential influence on the process.
Rudy, what started this door opening was a federal farm bill, and then Texas lawmakers did their own type of thing. Is this sure to go to court if this becomes state law?
Oh, yeah. Where there's smoke, there's fire. And the state is still in court. You may remember after the health department tried to make Delta 8 an illegal substance back in 21. So I'm sure a lawsuit's going to be filed. Smart Money says it will be done right here in Travis County. We'll get a progressive judge issuing a TRO, and then it'll probably go all the way up to the state Supreme Court.
All right, well, we will be right back. And on the other side of this break, we hear from new Senate Commerce Chair Ted Cruz. We'll be right back. In this segment, we are taking a closer look at the Senate Commerce Committee, which is run by Texas Senator Ted Cruz. It involves everything from aviation to college sports to AI. I talked to the senator one-on-one earlier this week.
And the Commerce Committee has jurisdiction over about 40% of the U.S. economy. And so my number one priority in the Senate, this has been true for all 13 years I've been here, My number one priority has been jobs, 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 jobs.
What do you make of just all of these issues that we have seen kind of in back-to-back weeks when it comes to aviation? Of course, the deadly crash a few weeks ago, but then a Delta flight leaving the United States and going into Canada, flipping upside down. You have smoke on a plane. What do you make of these? Are you going to call for a hearing or any type of inquiry?
Well, absolutely, and one of the responsibilities of the Senate Commerce Committee is aviation and the FAA. And I will say, first of all, the deadly crash that we had at DCA Reagan Airport was truly horrific, where an American Airlines plane collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter. 67 lives were lost that night in the worst commercial air accident in decades in the United States. One area that it is clear that we need to focus on, and that's a real priority for me, is modernizing air traffic control. You know, if you go to an air traffic control room, they're using literally 1950s technology. They're using radar and little slips of paper, and they're using floppy disks, which I guarantee if you ask your kids, they have no idea what a floppy disk is. And it makes no sense that we are monitoring millions of flights using technology from prior decades. And so it is a real priority. We will have hearings. We will be working to modernize air traffic control so that we can use GPS and the most advanced technology to keep people safe.
Another issue or topic that's kind of in your realm is AI.
Yes.
What concerns you?
Well, I tell you, Stephen, I actually think AI was a sleeper issue in this last election. I think it was one of the most consequential policy results of President Trump being reelected and Republican Senate and House, is that we're going to see government policies that encourage America to lead the world in AI.
Do you think AI still can open the door for misleading information getting out and some false information where we are at a time where, you know, people are believing things that aren't true?
So look, of course, with any new technology, there are risks. Any tool, you know, if you invent the automobile, people get run over. You have accidents and people misuse them. Anytime you have human beings, you're going to have some human beings who are criminals who choose to use a tool for nefarious ends. And the Take It Down Act addresses revenge porn, a phenomenon sadly we're seeing far too commonly, where non-consensual intimate images are put out online, and it addresses in particular deep fake non-consensual intimate images. They appeared to be naked pictures of her, they weren't real, but then sent it to all her classmates, and that's a grotesque violation of her rights and her privacy. And so my legislation, the Take It Down Act, number one, it makes it a crime to do that. You can't do that to somebody else. And the existing laws didn't make it a crime to distribute a deep fake. And so we needed a new legal regime, a new legal standard to make that a crime. And then secondly, the Take It Down legislation puts an obligation on the tech platforms to remove the content when they're notified by the victim. When the victim says, hey, that's me, and that picture I didn't consent to, remove it, that video, remove it, it puts an obligation to take it down. My legislation has already passed the Senate unanimously, 100-0. And I'm very confident we're going to move it through the House and get it passed, and we're going to put that bill on President Trump's desk to sign into law.
Greg, Senator Cruz is focusing on things like the outdated equipment and that air traffic controllers are using. He mentioned floppy disks. I'm young enough, but also old enough to know what a floppy disk is. Kids these days would not know what the heck that is. But it's interesting, he didn't talk about DEI, something that President Trump said in the immediate aftermath of this deadly crash. Do you think people have just forgotten about the president's comments about race possibly being a factor in this?
Look, Stephen, I think there is a significant segment of our population that remembers and repeats everything Mr. Trump says, as represented by Marjorie Taylor Greene, who wore that MAGA hat at the president's congressional address embossed with the words, "Trump was right about everything." I think there's another significant group which generally supports the president's policies, but also takes a good bit of what the commander-in-chief says with a grain of salt, i.e. Ukraine started the war and the like. As for the DEI blame game and the vaunted return to a meritocracy, I think a majority of Americans want to see some actual proof of diminished performance by so-called DEI hires before they buy into that. Perhaps it's forthcoming, but I haven't heard or seen that proof yet. Full disclosure, as the father of a disabled son, I'm actually following this issue closer than most.
Rudy, what's your take?
I got to disagree with Greg. I think there's a lot of examples of, questionable hires and not by merit. So I think that there's a lot of people who support the idea of getting back to merit-based hiring and instead of trying to fill a certain seat with a certain status and all that. Whether or not that's what's contributed to the air traffic control problem is another thing. But just wanted to say that. Let's face facts, though. The air traffic control problem, it's not a Republican problem. It's not a Democrat problem. It's a bipartisan problem, one that's been created and ignored by both parties. It was there during the Obama administration. It was there during Trump's first term. It was there the past 4 years under the Biden administration. We had a local congressman, Lloyd Doggett, who had been screaming, a Democrat, by the way, screaming for the past 4 years to help and do something with air traffic controllers, and his own party ignoring him. So based on all that, are we going to see a change? I don't know. Take a look at what happened and how the Democrats acted during Trump's speech just a few days ago. How the Democrats voted against protecting women's sports bill, and how the GOP right now, they're just all focused on cutting things. So can something be done? Should something be done? Yeah. Will something get done? I don't know. Stephen?
It wouldn't be Congress if things didn't get done. Greg, really quick, AI was a topic. Senator Cruz doesn't want it to be overly regulated. Could that bite us at the end?
Absolutely, Stephen. I know you are the youngest, albeit most talented member of this trio, and may not have seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I would bet the ranch that movie buff Rudy Koski has. The Stanley Kubrick film, released way back in 1968, offered the world a frightening image of what can happen when artificial intelligence goes wrong. Look, the tech savvy may be cackling at this old know-nothing geezer with 1 foot in a tar pit, but running headlong into unshackled AI is bound to have consequences, both good and bad. Call me conservative, call me a scaredy cat. I just think reliable guardrails for this new frontier of tech is the smart way to go. In other words, what's the big hurry? And if your answer is profit, well, that worries me.
All right, we'll have to leave it there.
Go with Greg
back,
if you want to survive.
We'll talk about what our issues are. We'll see you in a minute. All right. We always have issues, right? Greg Grugan, what's your issue?
All right, look, will the real Representative Jasmine Crockett stand up? I remember a feisty, albeit articulate, lawmaker in the Texas House, and yet this new transformation, profane, it's kind of a lounge act. I don't know what's going on with Jasmine Crockett. Is she looking for a different constituency? Because, the name calling and the dancing and all that stuff, call me an old fuddy-duddy, but it looks kind of made up. I don't know. Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, of course she's in this district, right? I think she is just filling a role that some on the Republican side have already done. The Marjorie Taylor Greens or the other ones now. Is she being more colorful in her language? Definitely. But just like how some people see the president and his statements, I think Jasmine Crockett is just becoming that Democratic side of the voice. Rudy, what do you think?
Yeah, I saw this coming. I covered her when she was a state representative under the Capitol Dome here in Austin, and some of the outlandish things and antics that she did during that time period. And then, she's somewhat become a cartoon character, starting with her passing the torch ad. Remember that, with the Pentecostal flame that came across? So this really doesn't surprise me at all. Moving to my issue, shout out to Texas space industry. We have 2 Texas-made lunar landers on the surface of the moon. Actually, 3, 2 now made by a Houston-made company that didn't have quite the success that they wanted, but nonetheless, they're on the moon. They have transmitting capabilities, and they're doing the things. And then a Cedar Park one, Cedar Park-made lunar lander that touched down perfectly and is performing exactly the way that they want. You know, a big shout out to all the folks that are in the Texas space industry. We've got a new age that's happening right now. We've got a new head of the Texas Space Commission who was talking to state lawmakers recently saying, you know, let's keep this going. We need to do it. And this is actually a national security issue. So a lot of Texas companies playing a big role in that. So that's my issue.
All right, my issue is college sports, and while the big dance is not on the network that you're watching, man, college sports is at its peak right now, especially college basketball. And of course, now that Texas, so the guys on the screen with me are pro SEC now, but the SEC is killing it in college basketball. Georgia beat Texas in Austin a couple days ago. Wondering if Georgia is going to make the big dance. I'm Georgia everything because I'm from Georgia, if y'all don't know. But I love Tar Heel basketball. People have been critical of Hubert Davis. He is getting a contract extension. He's not going anywhere. I wonder if the Tar Heels will make the big dance. That's my issue.
Don't forget the powerhouse Houston Cougars.
Yeah, you watch him. And Ole Miss just took down Tennessee on Wednesday. It's going to be crazy. March Madness certainly here. All right, that's all the time that we have to see this episode. Go to our station YouTube sites.
And keep the conversation going by interacting with us on social media.
Next week, more flashpoints on the Texas political landscape. Until then, be sure to let us know what you think the issue is.